Well, as the agenda for making Uganda a better country continues, the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development this week issued a report regarding the fight against poverty in this country. And this report emanates from 2021. It indicates a number of things, and one of those clear indicators is that those that are struggling under the poverty line occupy a percentage of 8.3. Regions with the highest level of poverty have also been indicated. Now, SEATINI is one of those civil society organizations that do a number of follow-up, especially on matters that regard the economics of Uganda. This is the Coffee Court, and joining me to discuss this is KAFEERO HERBERT. He's the manager in charge of communication at SEATINI in Uganda. Mr. HERBERT, my pleasure, and thank you for finding time to speak to us.
Thank you for having me. Greetings to the viewers out there. My name is KAFEERO HERBERT. I'm the Programs and Communications Manager at SEATINI. SEATINI is a short form for Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Information and Negotiations Institute. It's a non-government organization that works towards making trade, tax, and investment-related policies work for the people, especially the common people.
One would ask, how can a country like Uganda take time to investigate on matters of poverty? Maybe it would take time to find out issues of how economies can actually develop. So why take time to find out poverty levels in Uganda, in your opinion?
Thank you so much. Poverty reduction is part of the development agenda of government. And beyond even the national level, beyond our government looking at reducing poverty as part of its development agenda, we also signed the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. And SDG 1 speaks to reducing poverty. And also, reducing poverty is also reflected in our plans. For example, the National Development Plan 3. So improving the well-being of Ugandans is a key role of government. Okay. Because government has a key role of ensuring that there is well-being and improved livelihoods for all the people.
So this report, I know you were part of the conference where the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development was actually issuing this report. A number of key things were highlighted. And one of it is the percentage of 8.3 people living below the poverty line. Your take on this?
Thank you so much. The report, which is dubbed the Poverty Status Report 2021, is a timely report that has been released by the Ministry of Finance in partnership with UNDP. It's a good research product, because with research, then you can make informed decisions. And the report is under the theme Jobs, Informality, and Poverty in Uganda. Okay. So why this report, and what's the importance of this report? Research is core to lead to successful interventions, because it helps to unearth a number of issues that can be addressed. And this report presents quite a number of issues. Like you mentioned, the high levels of poverty, the increasing levels of poverty, 8.3 million Ugandans living below the poverty line.
Is this a worrying percentage?
It is a worrying percentage, because here we're talking about poverty, but you cannot divorce poverty from the state of the economy. And the state of the economy is also not, it's a gloomy one, if I can say, because we are facing multiple crises. We faced COVID-19, and as the economy was gradually recovering from COVID-19, we got a setback of the Russia-Ukraine war, because although it's between Russia and Ukraine, but there are implications for countries like Uganda, because we are not only operating as Uganda in isolation. We're in the global economy. And in terms of trade, there are linkages. And since you asked about poverty, I'll not delve deep into Russia-Ukraine war, but just to establish the linkages, that it's really something that we have to worry about, because amid these multiple crises, the number of poor people is increasing. So it's a mix of challenges. From COVID-19, there was the Russia-Ukraine war, there was the Ebola outbreak, the drought and floods, and the debt, because there is the debt crisis. According to Bank of Uganda, the public debt stock has increased up to 80 trillion. In fact, our debt to GDP ratio is 53, is at 53%.
Okay.
That's actually worrying because it's even slightly more than half. And a number of researchers and think tanks like EPRC have warned that we are getting into a danger zone, the red line.
Especially if nothing is actually done right. There's a number of things that the report puts forth. They're talking about regions. I've had engagements with people coming from the eastern part that quite often all the reports indicate that the eastern region is not doing better. So is this report.
Thank you so much. This report highlights that there are higher levels of poverty, both in the eastern region and the northern region. And a number of factors explain that. But before I actually even delve deep into speaking to poverty in the eastern and northern part of Uganda, I would also wish to point out the drivers of poverty that have been highlighted in the report. And some of the drivers include the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. Drought is also one of the drivers of poverty, but also pests and diseases.
COVID-19 came in 2019, the report. Oh, the report.
Yes, this report was actually undertaken, the research that culminated into this report was undertaken 5 years back. So just look at 5 years back, it was actually before the COVID-19 pandemic. And even during the COVID-19 pandemic, research was ongoing to yield into this report. And just to speak to the drivers of poverty.
Drivers of poverty in the country.
These are the three, but there are many other drivers of poverty. The three highlighted, the major drivers highlighted in the report, like I earlier alluded, it's COVID-19 pandemic, there is pests and diseases that are affecting the productivity of the agriculture sector, and then, of course, the drought, because you too must have heard about the Karamoja situation, where a number of people were starving. And in a number of parts of Uganda, famine was a major issue and a concern to very many people.
Okay. Yes. So the eastern part, I think I need to be hard on this. All the reports, they keep coming up. The eastern part, you look at the HIV reports. The eastern part, you look up, now we talk about the poverty reports, still the eastern part. What explains this? I know SEATINI, your operation is everywhere.
Thank you so much. According to this report, I just want to speak in relation to the report, because according to this research, there are higher levels of poverty in the eastern part of Uganda. But a number of issues have been highlighted that contribute to the higher levels of poverty. One, the leasing of land. Increasingly, for example, in Busoga region, the main economic activity, agriculture activity, is sugarcane growing. So a number of people have leased their land to get some money from those that are growing sugarcanes. Yes, so that's one area, because when you lease your land for 2 or 3 or 5 years, you deprive yourself and your family, your household of food, because when you lease your land, then you don't have enough to grow your what? Your food for consumption and also surplus for selling. But also the other issue is, when you lease your land, you lose, I mean, this is an asset. It's a factor of production. Land is a factor of production. So meaning you are disempowered. And in Busoga, in Jinja and Busoga region, broadly, if you are to visit some of the families, they grow sugarcanes up to their doorstep. You get?
So they grow the sugar.
And yet, the returns are meager. Returns from what they grow are meager. So there are a number of challenges. Even when you are to look at teenage pregnancies, they're higher in Busoga region. And this report highlights issues of multidimensional poverty. In fact, the report says that 42.1% of Ugandans are facing multidimensional poverty. This is not only income poverty, but also poverty that is connected to access to education, access to health, access to energy, access to sanitation. So there are quite a number of issues. But just to speak to the other issue of chronic poverty. Chronic poverty has also been identified as an issue that has kept a number of people in vicious cycle of poverty, a continuous cycle of poverty that they have failed to break free, because if a family, an average household family size in Uganda is 4 to 6 people, an average family size. That's on average. But some families exceed that number. And further still, this report highlights that a number of people rely on agriculture as a source of livelihood. And those that are into agriculture are facing higher levels of poverty because of the broader challenges that are facing the agriculture sector. Our agriculture sector is depending heavily on rainfall. So we know the vagaries of weather, and rain is now unpredictable. So sometimes it rains, sometimes it doesn't rain. And also, the government hasn't invested a lot in weather forecasting so that that information can trickle down to farmers to enable them to predict the seasons.
But isn't it worrying that we're talking about agriculture? One, which is a backbone of Uganda. Two, it is one of the key pillars. If you look at Vision 2040, I know SEATINI critically follows up such issues. Isn't this a matter that should worry us as a country or as civil society?
Thank you so much. It is indeed worrying, but government recognizes the need to transform the economy from subsistence to commercialized, and agriculture is not left behind. But when you look at the nature of agriculture is dependent on rainfall.
True.
But then the other challenges surrounding agriculture is limited access to extension services by farmers, fake agriculture inputs, including seeds, and low production and productivity, limited value addition, to mention but a few. Because there is even no incentive for some of the farmers to produce because of lack of a minimum price for agricultural products. The prices fluctuate. You all know that. If you are to walk on the streets of Kampala, you might not miss seeing young people running around with 10 pineapples, selling them at 10,000. That speaks volumes, because if pineapples can be sold in Kampala at 10,000, 10 pineapples, imagine how much a farmer gets at the production center in the garden, because it means they get less than 10,000. They could even be getting 2,000. So there are a number of challenges that are curtailing farmers and producers from breaking free and getting greater gains.
Okay. And maybe those viewing us, you could find this report on the website of Ministry of Finance Planning and Economic Development. But now, that is a report according to Ministry of Finance Planning and Economic Development. Maybe as SEATINI, what is your proposal on especially how Uganda as a country can manage and handle issues of poverty in this country?
Thank you so much. As SEATINI Uganda, we believe that we need a holistic view, a holistic approach, because you cannot look at poverty in isolation, but we have to look at reviving the economy amid these multiple crises. The crises that I talked about, the debt crisis, there was the COVID-19 crisis, whose far-reaching implications, the negative effects are still felt.
How does the debt crisis connect to this report?
Of course, a higher percentage of our budget goes to debt servicing and interest repayment. So if government spends a higher proportion of the budget on servicing debt, it means less is being spent on social sectors. True. Sectors that are closer to the people. Less is being spent on productive sectors. So it means debt servicing is depriving us of the much needed resources to invest in productive sectors and also social sectors. And also the other issue is, when you look at the economy in totality, you cannot ignore the issue of policy, because these policies give us direction of where to go.
But we have good policies as a country. You have
good policies. Of course, that's what people say, but it's not entirely true, because when you look at the Investment Code Act 2019, it has a number of gaps. And SEATINI has engaged government, Uganda Investment Authority, and other relevant government departments and agencies on the need to review our Investment Act. one of the issues it doesn't deliver on is performance requirements. There are several gaps in our investment act that need to be addressed. One of the issues is performance requirements. When investors come here, there are issues, promises that they make, because it's not only a give. If investors are given tax holidays, land concessions, there are other things that they promise to deliver on. Promises of creating employment.
I would think those would be actually the key fundamentals that would help us deal with
issues of poverty. Because you see, when they create employment, it also speaks to reducing poverty, because people will have money, income, you get. And also, there is the issue of lack of joint ventures in our investment code. Then, the other issue that we think that we need to address around the policy landscape is organizing our trade. But trade is guided by policies. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area is an opportunity. But you see, beyond signing an agreement, there is the reality on the ground that must be fixed by policies. The government, Ministry of Trade, is leading on developing the strategy. But beyond the strategy, there is the national trade policy that expired in 2018. So we are calling upon government of Uganda to invest more in the productive sectors, including trade and manufacturing, but also addressing the policy deficits. And one of the policy deficits is reviewing our investment code, also reviewing the national trade policy. But also beyond that, we need to also look at how we can use trade and tourism to reduce poverty, because it's not as we used to look at it traditionally, where we were looking at trade in goods alone. But now there's trade in services. Okay. And also tourism has linkages to reducing poverty, because as the tourists come in the country, the producers will be able to sell, isn't it? So there's a linkage in reducing poverty.
Okay, and maybe two things. I know you, SEATINI, you are experts when it comes to issues of taxation. Two things. One, this report comes out at a time when we're in the process of budgeting. What does this mean? Secondly, there's been a review from the ministerial perspective to now, program-based budgeting. What do these the two indicate, and what do they mean, actually?
Thank you so much. In this budget, it's 49.9 trillion, nearly 50 trillion.
The next financial.
Yes. There are a number of issues in the budget. Of course, it's program-based budgeting. If we are to look at agro-industrialization, it's 1.4 and a few points, 1.4 trillion.
How do these connect to the report?
They connect to the report because, you see, producers, since poverty is resident in the rural areas, the producers in the rural areas are facing a number of challenges. Low value addition, limited value addition, limited access to common user facilities. They are facing a number of challenges along the value chain. Post-harvest handling, pests and diseases. So government needs to invest in productive sectors, increase more budgetary allocation to productive sectors. Because when there is increased funding to productive sectors, it means the people will be getting out of poverty because they will get much more returns from whatever they do. But also, there are budget cuts in this budget, austerity measures of reducing. Those austerity measures have a linkage with increasing poverty, because if you cut on social sectors, for example, health, you cut on education, it means the poor will be affected more because austerity measures affect the poor more. But an opportunity here is the report, the Poverty Status Report 2021, highlights a number of actions and proposals that need to be taken on by government. And this is a timely report because we're in the budget cycle, so these should be taken on seriously by the government, but using a holistic approach.
Your parting shots as we wind up this interview.
Thank you so much. As a matter of conclusion, we call upon government to look at the economy in totality, because you cannot look at poverty in isolation of the economy. The entire economy needs to be revamped. We need to boost productivity, but also we cannot lose sight of the continental and the global affairs. We need to increase the competitiveness of our private sector, of our MSMEs, to address the long-standing challenges of compliance to standards, competitiveness, and of course, the other issue is we need to mobilize the private sector and organize the private sector along specific products that we can ultimately sell out there.
Thank you, Mr. Herbert KAFEERO, for speaking to us. He's in charge of communication at SEATINI. Of course, that is his perspective regarding the report on poverty that was issued by the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. For sure, I know if we are to deal with poverty, it is your responsibility, it is my responsibility, it is our responsibility. And this is the Coffee Court. My name is Fred Makubuya.